Good afternoon from Georgia's Europe office in Munich. My name is Sergio Dominguez, and together with the team here, we would like to welcome you to the third installment of the Georgia Locations webinar series to celebrate Belgium, one of Georgia's strongest partners. We are honored to count on the presence of 44 Belgian companies that operate 79 facilities in Georgia, more than any other US state. Just last month, we welcomed yet another Belgian company, Marilec, who will open its first office in Atlanta. We hope today's program will reinforce why Georgia is indeed the first choice for Belgian companies in America, and we have invited Barco and Beauplan to speak about their experience in the Peach State. For almost 50 years, the state of Georgia has maintained a permanent representation in Europe, one that was established in Brussels, Belgium in 1973. And so today, serving as an extension of the Georgia Department of Economic Development, the team here works to recruit new investment, support existing companies, advise and guide small businesses to open new markets in Europe. And furthermore, we forge new and existing institutional relationships, nurture partnerships that date back decades, and that continue to make Georgia one of the most engaging US states on the continent. So before we get started, I'd like to thank our partners and special guests for being here today and for supporting the event, namely the Georgia Department of Economic Development, the Consulate General of Belgium, the Belgian American Chamber of Commerce of the South, Barco, Beauplan, Arnold, Golden, and Gregory, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us today. I now would like to play a video from our Chief Operating Officer, Ms. Brittany Young. Thank you.
Welcome to this special celebration of the Belgian business community. Thank you all for joining us as we put a spotlight on the outstanding relationship between Belgium and the state of Georgia. I would like to thank the Belgian Consul General in Atlanta for being with us today. I'd also like to thank Anton Merkins with AGG for your longtime support. I am sure your fireside chat with representatives from Barco and Beauplan will offer a great chance to hear more about Georgia's Belgian business community. We hope it will motivate other Belgian companies that may be considering a leap across the Atlantic. I am always proud to say that the state of Georgia has had an office in Europe for almost 50 years. That office, which is now located in Munich, was actually founded in Brussels in 1973 by then Governor Jimmy Carter. Our Georgia teams in Europe and in the US have assisted hundreds of international firms with locations in Georgia, as well as Georgia companies in Europe. 2 weeks ago, the 2021 trade data was released, and Belgium is prominently featured in our report. Last year, Georgia exports to Belgium totaled $823 million, making Belgium the 13th largest export market for Georgia. In turn, Georgia imports from Belgium totaled $2.4 billion, with Belgium ranking 15th among our importer nations. And it's not just business opportunities that we share. Atlanta and Brussels have had a sister city relationship since 1983, and in academics, the university system of Georgia offers 9 study abroad programs to Belgium. Delta Airlines makes it simple to travel between Belgium and our capital city, Atlanta. Finally, the Georgia Ports Authority has a strong relationship with the ports of Belgium and offers weekly routes to 2 Belgian ports. I think it's safe to say that Georgia and Belgium have established a strong foundation that will continue to support new growth and opportunities. We are also looking forward to welcoming a high-level Belgian delegation with plans to visit us in early June. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to connect with our Europe office. Sergio and his team are great resources for all of your Georgia business needs. Again, thank you for joining us today. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to the Consul General of Belgium in Atlanta. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon for those who are joining us from Belgium. It is a pleasure for me to be here today. Right, my name is Michel Jabsov, and I'm the Consul General of Belgium here, based in Atlanta, but covering 10 states up the south. I am by training an engineer. I've had a first career in the private sector in remote sensing, Earth observation. I'm just mentioning because this will be relevant to some of the remarks I will be making later. And I mostly in my career was working on trade and investment support to all companies, and I also spent 8 years in China. Right off the bat, I would like to maybe spend a few seconds reflecting on the current situation. I won't impose a geopolitical analysis on you. That's not the point today. But one really lesson that we can already draw from the current tragic situation is the importance of the US-EU relationship. And this is, I mean, as we speak, almost 4,000 soldiers are leaving Georgia to go to Germany, or they left yesterday actually. But this is, of course, not only important in terms of the military relationship, but also everything commercial, everything trade. This is actually one of the reasons why, after 8 years in China, I really wanted to come here to the US, because of the conscience of the importance of the relationship. We have permanent dialogues going on at all time. It is a little bit under the radar. A lot of time we tend to focus on what's maybe not ideal, not perfect in the relationship, but we have so many people dedicated to advancing the conversation on cyber security, on norms and standards in industry and in tech, on platform regulation, on exchanges of information, on investment screening, on export of dual use good. All of this creates a web of very strong relationship between us and the US. That's important for the world we are shaping. And of course, this is underpinned by all the companies from the US that have chosen Europe to have their activities, and vice versa. And we can see that this work is being very successful. Sometimes we also underestimate the importance of this trade relationship. US is the fourth biggest partner in terms of good exchanges of Belgium. So we have France, Germany, Netherlands, and just right after we have the US, fifth in terms of services. Georgia exports 6 times more to the EU than they do to China, for instance. We also always talk about China, but EU is very important. EU is also worth 60% of the jobs of the foreign invested jobs here in Georgia. Belgium is, by the way, third destination for Georgia exports to Europe. So we see that we have this very intense relationship. My job, I'm the Consul General of Belgium. I'm not paid to do the promotion of Georgia specifically. I'm actually paid to do mostly 3 things. I'm paid to serve the Belgian community here in the south, like 6,000-7,000 people, the Belgians that are living here in the south. I'm paid to help our companies, and I'm paid to emphasize the image of Belgium here. And actually, it's a very easy job. For working on the Belgian image, our image is very good. We have a lot of companies here. It was mentioned by Sergio in the introduction. We just for Georgia, we have around 80 sites, 80 offices and production lines by Belgian companies here in the south. It's the highest total of any US state. Our companies are very well integrated into the industrial and technological fabric of the state of Georgia. Our image is excellent. We have lots of bilateral relationship. So that makes it very easy. We have also a very strong official presence here in the south. So we do have this office, of course, the Consul General that I'm heading here in Atlanta, but we do also have trade offices operating from Atlanta, from North Carolina, from Washington, from Texas, covering the whole southern region. So as a Belgian company, if you join us here, you will be well served by an official Belgian presence here. We do help our companies, and this also is a pretty easy thing to do. We have excellent relationship, and I must here really salute the team of GDED of Georgia Department of Economic Development. We are in touch with them all the time, with Commissioner Pat Wilson, so it's the equivalent of Minister of Economics. We're in touch with these teams. You would be surprised by how many people in the highest circle of the authorities, the local authorities, be it from the state side or from the city side or from the county side, how many people speak perfect Dutch, perfect French, perfect German. It is really easy. Of course, most of our companies, people here speak also perfect English. But I mean, the fact that those people are very open to Europe. They've been there. They have an office, of course, in Germany. That makes it very easy for our companies. And the third element, the third aspect is serve our community. This is also pretty easy because our community is so well integrated. Most of them are long-term here, very little hardship, I must say. The quality of life here is absolutely amazing. But so despite the fact that it's not my job to promote Georgia, I still want to say a few words on this. Of course, when you live in a place, you always have a bias. You always are very heavily influenced by what you see around you. And what I see around, so you have to be careful with that. But what I see around me, and it is something I'm actually addicted to, is optimism and dynamism. It is really incredible. You don't have to take my word for it. You can just have a look online at the tendencies, the trends in internal migration throughout the US, for instance. Have a look at where companies are moving from and moving to within the US. Have a look at the net migration numbers, where the people are living, which state the people are living and where they're going to, and you will quickly get a pretty clear picture. And one of the reasons why I want to mention this is throughout my career, I've always been a little bit frustrated that I always had to explain where Belgium was, why we were like different, and why we were worthy of interest. And sometimes I have the impression it's also a little bit the same for here, for the southern region of the US, despite the fact that they are scoring consistently high in terms of being the best states to do business. And Georgia has been ranked first in many of those rankings over the past actually the past decade. Despite that, when I discuss with companies from Belgium who are considering some further steps in the US, they very often come up with New York, with the Northeast, with Boston, or with California, and sometimes Texas. Now, I must say that Southeast is more and more on the shortlist of our companies, and I'm happy it is the case. But it reminds me of when I had to also fight for this. Actually, here sometimes as well, it's Germany, 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 and you have to explain to companies, so in this case, US companies, that no, Germany is big, Germany is very famous, but it's not necessarily the best place to do business in Europe for all companies. And Belgium can be really a relevant base for many companies. It's a bit the same here. And what makes Georgia and Atlanta as well, especially interesting in my eyes, it is the combination of three things. It is a very, very rich, booming tech environment, tech ecosystem. You have an incredibly dynamic university system producing thousands, I don't have the exact, actually tens of thousands of technical profile of engineers, for instance, every year. And it has been quite spectacular how many tech companies have migrated from California and from other states to Atlanta recently. It's very industrially, very high-tech oriented ecosystem. That's one aspect of it. And I'm talking tech, I'm talking as well. I'm in military, cyber, space, financial service, fintech, just name it, biotech, everything. But also you have this cultural aspect that to me has always been very, very important. Atlanta is actually, you may not know it, all of you, Atlanta is actually the place in the US where most movies are shot, more than in Hollywood. It's also one of the base for urban music, for rap music. And so you have this huge level of ambient creativity. And in my eyes, it has always been very important to have those two components, to have the industry, but also to have the creativity. And it's at the border between those two worlds that the richest environment actually comes. And then you have the political aspect. This is a little bit more tricky, but Atlanta is the cradle of civic right to this day. It is a very interesting place to observe in terms of the ongoing politics. And actually, I do also believe that it keeps people engaged. It's also a perfect spot to observe the future trends. And if you if you think about it, it's also actually some of the qualities of Belgium. We do also have this very, very high density of cultural life, this very tech-oriented society, and this very, of course, interesting with EU, NATO, and all the rest, and the internal politics. The politics is never boring in Belgium. So there are a lot of common points between Georgia and Belgium on that regard. One last point. I mentioned triangle, but every good triangle has four corners. One last point that I don't want to forget is, and it's connected actually to the political side of it, because it has been a cradle of civil rights activism, because of everything that's being done. And it's very interesting. I don't have time to elaborate on it, but it's being really pushed by the business world here. There is a lot of DEI, of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives taking place here. And it's also called the Black Mecca at Atlanta. You have Black universities, Black banks, Black venture capitalists, etc. And this, why is it relevant for you maybe, or why is it interesting? It is because Atlanta is now also attracting lots of migrants from usually very highly qualified, and lots of companies from Africa. And as you know, it is also one of the strengths of Belgium, this relationship with Africa. And so we see more and more a triangle between Africa, Brussels and Belgium, and Atlanta rising in many different sectors. And I do believe personally that this is something that will get stronger and stronger in the future. I haven't checked what time it was when I started speaking. I'm almost done. Sergio, make some signs if I'm too late. Do I have 2 more minutes to conclude?
Yes, you do. And then we will go ahead and also play the introductory video from our Chief Operating Officer. So 2 more minutes. Thank you so much.
Perfect. One last thing. So I said I came from the private sector. I worked for 10 years as an engineer before joining diplomacy, and I was working on market development. So I know that sometimes opening a new office is a huge step. It's costly. It is complicated as well. I've done it also many times in support of companies when I was in China, because this is what I was doing there. One thing, I mean, when companies take the decision to open an office, they really focused on the market, of course, they are targeting, and they're looking at the numbers and whether this office is generating enough business to justify itself. But something that's maybe undervalued a bit, underestimated a bit, is how interesting it is as well to have an antenna, to have this office as an antenna plugged into this incredible creativity that you have here, but also different way to do business. And so having that can also be very advantageous for your home office. And I've always felt that sometimes you can be a bit too comfortable in your home market. Things are going well, you have a good position on the market, you know all the bells and whistles, etc. And you stop asking yourself questions. And when you do this huge step of getting into a different market, and I was mentioning in the beginning that US is a relatively easy market for companies, but it's still very different. And so there is a lot that all companies that are based here take from just the simple presence here. Yeah, I would be remiss to not mention that the fact that we, and maybe some of you will participate to it, we have a huge trade mission coming to Atlanta early June. It will be more than 200 companies, 350 people that will be traveling here. Just the fact that this trade mission led by Princess Astrid will come to Atlanta for 3 days is very significant, of course. They're doing Atlanta, New York, Boston. So it really puts the Southeast in the map, and I do hope that I will be meeting many of you on that occasion, and I'm looking forward to it. To conclude, most of our Belgians here, they've been here for a long time. When they come here, they usually come here for a Belgian company, and then when the Belgian company try to call them back, they switch to a different company because they don't want to leave anymore. So consider this my final warning. If you come and if you bring people, those people will want to stay here. That's how good life is here. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this meeting. I'm giving now the floor back to Sergio.
With that, I would like to pass it on to Mr. Anton Merkins, who will moderate the fireside chat with Franco Real and Tanya Van Beever. Thank you so much.
Good morning, good afternoon for those of you in Europe. My name is Anton Merkins. I'm an attorney here at Arnold Gold & Gregory. I'm part of the Immigration and Global Mobility practice. So I handle visas and green cards and citizenship. Originally from Brussels, Belgium. I've been in the United States. I've been in Georgia since 1982. I also, as part of my help in the Belgian community, I'm an advisor for economic diplomacy for the Consulate of Belgium in Atlanta, and work closely with Consul General Garepsov. It's a beautiful day in Georgia. It's going to be 80 degrees this weekend. Blue skies, not a cloud in the sky, full sun. It's a great place to be. And Georgia is an easy sell. It's when you look at the United States and you think about Georgia, there are so many positives that would attract a company to Belgium. Today, we have two of those Belgian companies joining us, and to let you know why they chose Georgia, why they picked Georgia over other states. Those companies are Barco, of course, a household name in Belgium, and also Beauplan, a newer company, at least to Georgia, but they're fantastic companies. Barco is growing, Beauplan is growing tremendously. Know both Tanya at Barco and Frankie at Beauplan, and they will now introduce their companies. So Tanya, please tell us about Barco and about yourself.
Hi, yes, thank you, Anton. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Tanya Van Beever. I'm the Director of Sales, Global Sales Operations for Barco, located here in Duluth, close to Atlanta in Georgia. Actually, this is my 15th year at Barco, the last 11 ones spending time here in Georgia. Thanks very much for having Barco part of this panel. I hope we can give some good insights in why we are here. That being said, can we bring up the slides, Hannah? Thank you so much. So I don't have many slides, but I just want to give you a little bit of background for those who don't know Barco very well. We are a global technology leader. We work mostly on our network visualization solutions, and that is in the entertainment market, enterprise market, and also in the healthcare market. So as it is stated there, we enable bright outcomes, and that is actually, we want to make sure that we transform information and make sure that we can have a nice experience for our customers. So on the slide, you see one example. This is the Olympics that was in the Winter Olympics in Beijing. You see some of these projectors that we used to brighten up the stage. This was actually the stage where the medals were given out to the athletes. Now, if you go to the next slide, because that's Beijing, that's far away. On the next slide, I give some pictures of what we do in Georgia, right? Because I think that's also important for you to understand that we do have business here with local partners, although we have business across the US. So on the top right, I'm sure you recognize the Van Gogh immersive experience. So that has been done like across the world. We did have a session here in Atlanta in the Pullman station, which is a very nice setting, by the way. But that gives one idea of how we work with local partners and do a local setup. The other one on the left-hand side, the Georgia Aquarium. We do have Georgia Aquarium is a big thing here in Atlanta. It's a beautiful aquarium, by the way. And we do have some projectors set up there. On the bottom, two visuals from the Atlanta airport. So for those of you who are about to visit Georgia again, or will be coming for the first time, I want you to pay attention. If you leave the train in the Atlanta station and you look up, just before you enter the arrival hall, you have a big LED screen. It's a Barco LED screen, and it will guide you to where you need to be in the arrival hall. If you leave Atlanta again and you go down the escalators, you go down to the train to bring you to the right platform, again, you will see the screen, a Barco screen, and it is projectors in that case. So we do have some local connections here, and that's part of the reason why we chose Georgia in the first place, right? So Barco, the name itself, it's Belgian American radio company. It has a long history with the United States. But at some point, we decided we need some location, some port of entry to start our distribution business for projection. And that's actually when Barco started here, setting up their own distribution center or company in Atlanta. That was in way before my time, in 1986, October 1986. That's how we landed in Atlanta. So later on, there's been some acquisitions. We now are here in Duluth, which is was part of an acquisition, but it brought us a production environment. Yeah. So we still have a production/repair center here in Duluth, which is extremely important for all of our customers across the United States. Yeah. Now, the reason why Atlanta was chosen in the first place, Anton gave a little hint on that, like with the good weather. Obviously, the weather is great here. Always has been in the 11 years I've worked here. There's been some rainy days, but mostly it's really sunny. Even in the winter time, it's sunny and rain goes away very quickly. So you do not have that gray sky that you know from Belgium. But anyway, that's only part of it. If you want to do business, there needs to be more than that, obviously. But the connection with Belgium is important. So at that time, there was a direct connection between Atlanta and Brussels, very important. Today, it's not direct anymore, but it's still very easy to get to Brussels. And then there is the cost of living, obviously, and the cost of doing business. Yeah. So you can look at all kinds of industry reports and whatever list you want to look at, but Georgia is really a great state to do business and have that cost of doing business at a minimum. Now, going a little bit further in the future, Barco has spread across the US and there's been acquisitions and so on. But still, the way we defined Atlanta be our home base in the first place, we looked at the footprint again a few years ago, 2017, and verified, does it still make sense to have all these locations across the US? So at that point, we again looked at all those lists, at all the rankings of all the states. We looked at connections with Europe, but we also looked at where are our customers. Yeah? And so if you do a mapping of where are our customers in healthcare, where are our customers in cinema, where are our AV partners? If you map that out across the US, you actually see that on the east side, you have the majority of these companies, east, middle, south. So there's a huge density in that area. And if you do the middle of that, you actually are just right in Atlanta. So it just reinforced us to, in 2017, 2018, to again decide like the operational headquarters are in Atlanta. That makes the most sense for us because that's for us the center point. You can easily get to any other customer within the United States, and it's still the best location to be for doing business. So, there's even after all these years, we still reviewed and looked at those same parameters and we come to the same conclusion. And actually, like this year, we did a similar exercise, and we will also have our IMAX projectors being repaired here in Duluth. Obviously, once you have a foothold and you have a production environment, it's easy to build further upon that. But I just want to say that it's very easy to make that decision to come to Georgia just because of all the advantages that it brings. And I will hold it here for my part. Turn it back to Anton.
Thank you, Tanya. That was very enlightening, and loved Barco. When I was a little boy, Barco made televisions in Belgium. I remember that. They were fantastic, and of course, gotten much bigger now in the globally. I'd like to introduce also Frank O'Dale. Frank is a friend of mine who came to the United States went to Georgia in 2014. And Frank, please introduce yourself and your company, Boplan.
Thank you very much for reminding me about that, Anton. 2014, I remember arriving here. You helped me with my visa. It took me out to that Thai place very close to your office, and so yeah, you were one of the first people I met here in Atlanta. Thank you very much for joining and for having me on this panel. Very quickly about myself, my name is Frank O'Riel. In Dutch, it's pronounced O'Riel. I'm the president of Boplan USA. Just to tell you a very quick thing about myself, I arrived in the States in 2000, where I lived for 3 years in Los Angeles, 2 years in Pittsburgh, went back to Belgium for about 9 years, and then in 2014 moved here to Atlanta to set up Boatplan USA. About our company, if I can, I will share a screen, and I hope that everyone will be able to see this. There you go. Anton, can you confirm that you see the screen? So for people who don't know Boatplan in Belgium, you might actually have heard from Boatplan as we provide now barriers for large cycling events. That's where I get, on a daily basis messages from friends in Belgium saying, we saw you again on the news. That's where Boatplan is getting to be known for. But our real business is actually industrial safety equipment. We brought to market in early 2000s a brand new technology for industrial barriers who protect your facilities against the impacts of forklift trucks. Where typical steel guardrail is used, we make that in a flexible material, as you can see on the screen. That means that when you hit it with a forklift truck, it basically just flexes and then comes back into its original shape without any damage to itself or to concrete or to the forklift truck and so on. Boatplan has grown to now provide a full range of safety products for the industrial environment, going from industrial guardrails to goalposts to bollards to column protectors, racking protectors, you name it, anything that you need for protecting your facility, we basically have that. Boatplan is a company located in Belgium in Moorsele, close to Kortrijk, and has been created in 1999 by Xavier Ramon, who still to this day is our owner and CEO. And in 2014, I came here to the United States to set up Boatplan USA and basically import our products into the US and provide our customer base nationwide with these industrial safety products. Let me see, I am going to stop sharing now. Wanted to also say a little bit about why Georgia, and I think the fireside chat is going to start. So before this meeting, I kind of wrote up an entire list as to why we chose Georgia. In 2014, when I moved here, I did a study myself. Our CEO gave me basically a carte blanche, said you can establish yourself wherever you want in the United States. And I really looked at all the aspects that were involved, and there was really only one conclusion. And for us, that was establishing ourselves in Metro Atlanta. If you have a logistical company, if you need to reach the majority of the United States with a product that you need to ship out, then Atlanta just is the part that makes most sense. I can go over all the reasons why that is, from the best business reasons, which we've already heard, low cost of operations, good people, good talent pool, to the location itself. Atlanta is within an easy reach, 2-hour flight of 80% of the US population, within a 2-day trucking drive of 88% of the population, the largest airport, only 6 hours difference with our headquarters in Belgium. There's many, many reasons why we came to here. The ports in Charleston and Savannah being great ports. I can go on and on. But there's a lot of business reasons that make really good sense. And then there's a lot of personal reasons that also make good sense. I moved in 2014 with my family, with my 2 children and my wife. And we found that Georgia is just an amazing state in terms of simplicity. Everything is easy here. Everything is high quality here. It's really nice to live here, from the weather to how everything looks here. It's just a really, really nice place to live. There's a lots to do, and there's a huge Belgian community, which is very helpful for anyone moving from Belgium to here. I don't think there's a Belgian community like this anywhere else in the United States. So it always helps when you can call people and share best practices or socially meet with people from your own country. So there's really too many advantages to list up, but for us, Atlanta and Georgia was a no-brainer. So, Anton, back to you.
Thank you, Frank. That is great. Now, Tanya, I know you weren't involved in Barco coming to Georgia in the 80s, But can you give us some insight on why Barco chose Georgia over other states, perhaps?
Right. So at that point, Barco was looking for to expand their projection business. We already had other locations within the US for textile. It was North Carolina and other stuff. But especially for projection, we needed to find a easy to reach location to do our distribution. Yeah. And so in order to reach any place easily and not too expensive, because we could go to New York or whatever, but it made sense to go to Atlanta. We had set up our first importer business at that moment in Atlanta. And the reason just because the importer was there, we had our distribution center there, and it just took off from there. Yeah. And then when we had a chance to expand the business and go beyond projection, going to military displays, rugged displays, that's where, Chromatics, who first was in Kennesaw and then in Duluth. So we saw other opportunities in the area for us as a company to grow. And we took those opportunities, like I said, to enhance or increase the business, also having a production facility here. Now, because it is important to have something local to be able to serve your customers locally quickly. And for us, that production, it was for a niche market at that time, but that production facility has grown into a repair center, which is now the only repair center here in the US for all of our products. Yeah. So it started out like just trying to wet our toes a little bit, right? And look for a distribution channel. But it grew into so much more, and it was very successful in doing so.
And Tanya, you also recently consolidated some operations and chose Atlanta to do that and expand in Atlanta. And tell us what went into that.
So that's where I think very similar to what Frank was saying, like we did a study, right? You look at all these sites that give you overview of cost of living and cost of doing business, taxes, people, employees, different types of engineering or profiles that you're looking for. So you look at all these elements, and then you really decide, well, this is the place to be, right? There are other states who rank very well, but if you combine everything, then it just made sense for us to actually consolidate all of the operations here in Atlanta. So we moved parts from California even to here, and we moved several of our California offices to here, just to have that one headquarters who, first of all, if you look across the United States, the location is easy to communicate with Belgium, and it is also easy to communicate with the West Coast, because we do obviously have business at the West Coast. So you're like in the center, being able to communicate across the US and still with your headquarters in Belgium.
Great. Thank you, Tanya. Frank, back to you. I noticed some of your advertising had an American football player on it. So tell us how you adapted your marketing to the American standards as opposed to what's happening in Belgium and Europe. What's different?
I'll be honest with you. The way that the marketing was done was actually not necessarily done for just the United States. It was done from our European headquarters. It was done for our operations globally. They just happened to choose the football team as a team of showing our products are strong, associated with strength. I have to admit, the change in marketing that our company went through in the beginning, we were a company that was very refined, had small lettering, had it was like less is more, and being very refined. I think is a marketing structure that works extremely well in different markets. For us in the United States, when I saw this marketing team, which was launched about 2017, 2018, it was all I could do to go to my CEO and give him a big kiss on his forehead, because the reality is for our market, it's perfect. I'm sharing my screen there a little bit. The big football player, the big ready for impact, those big, bold messages, they work very well in the United States. So here I would say more than anywhere else in the world, it's perception is everything. So you want to make sure that you send the right perception to the customers here, and what they want is strength, what they want is big, what they want is bold. And so I would advise anyone to take that into account in their communication. Now, I'm also aware that that might not be the same for everything. If you sell lingerie, I'm not sure you're going to go with the same principles, you know, but at least it worked very well for us.
Tanya, what about Barco? I mean, it's a global name, a worldwide name, but how did you have to adapt your marketing strategy in the US as opposed to Europe or the rest of the world?
Yeah. So obviously our marketing is built from Belgium, from the headquarters there, and goes global. One of the important things, though, is that if you start out in Dutch, right, for Belgian market, then maybe you'll do it in French and maybe in German and maybe in English for UK. But if you start in US, you just have to make sure that it's US English. You're not like having a United Kingdom or an English company do that translation, because there's sometimes it's about the S and the Z, right? Small things in the way words are written, but it's also in the language and the formulation. So it's very important to make sure that it gets to be looked at from an American point of view. And through American eyes. So that's what we learned along the way. I will be very honest with that we just not literally translated. In terms of boldness, I agree with Frank. So you have to like put yourself out there and be very visible. I would also add to that that you need to look at your competition, right? So it is possible to make a comparison. I think that's different in Europe, but you can actually compare and make sure that you hit the message from your competitors in the right way. So you want to make sure you do that competition or that competitors overview and hit them with the right words, I would say.
Right, you got to be number one, you know,
Yes.
the best in the world.
Yes.
Frank, tell us about corporate culture. I know that, of course, Belgian companies like to run things from Belgium, and sometimes it's a little harder to get them to buy into what you're trying to do here in the U.S. So, how have you bridged that gap and that cultural difference?
I think it was a process, to be honest with you, Anton. I think it's a process. I also do believe it depends on what leadership you have in Europe. But if you have leadership that is open to the fact that things are slightly different over in a different market, then they'll be open to hearing about those differences. With us, anyone who comes to the United States, we've mentioned this in the prepared talk, I would strongly advise to have a Belgian run the company at the very least in its in growing stages and beginning stages, because there are differences, important differences in culture, in compensation, and how you handle employees here a little bit. There's a lot of different differences there that you need to translate to European leadership to make them understand and to make them aware of these differences. But it's a process. I think so. Because in the beginning, it's normal for a headquarters to say, well, we really want to draw a line that's pretty much the same all over the world. And I think as they see things change, as they see things move, as they see that things have validity and continue to have validity, I think they become more and more open to these differences. But you need someone to make that translation. I think managing a startup or a growing company here in the United States from a headquarters in Europe without having that translator in place is very, very difficult. And I've seen companies try it and I've seen companies fail at it too. So I would say mainly it's about starting with a Belgian presence here.
Mhm. And I guess it's more than translating millimeters into inches,
Yeah.
obviously. Tanya, I've been to your headquarters in Kortrijk, the Barco headquarters. It's fantastic. It's state of the art. How do you communicate with Belgium, and how do you get buy-in from Belgium to do what you need to do here in Atlanta?
So obviously Barco is not in a startup position, but I can relate to what Frank was saying. You have to know that right now there's only 2 Belgian employees here in the operational headquarters, or in the US actually. So 2 out of what, 300, 350. So that's not the main reason anymore to come here, right? It probably is at a startup, but at some point it's going to be very important that you address your US customers in a way that they're used to doing business. Now, in terms of communicating with Belgium, yes, there is some sort of translation, and I'm not saying it's translation from languages, but it's translation of habits that you have to explain. It's one thing in having here a management who understands the customer. It's another thing to have a supporting headquarters in R&D, in marketing, in logistics, to have them also understand what the needs are. And there is a sense of urgency here, always has been. It's much bigger than it is in Europe. So in terms of having holidays, having like 3 weeks off, it's non-existing here. So getting an answer from Europe like, oh, I'm off, it's not an end. You cannot just say that. It's impossible to explain this in the US. So those are things that seem like simple, but at some point they will hit your business. So you have to be aware of that. Always have a backup. Don't have these blunt out of office messages. They hit people the wrong way. So it's a matter of making sure that you're on top of things. I think the communication is a little bit different in the US. Any minimal piece of information is what you want to share. You need to share with your customers. Don't wait until you have like the full 100 detailed line explanation. Just give them any little piece of information that you can share to keep that communication going and to keep your customer engaged is a very important, and is a little bit different than what we used to in Belgium.
That is great advice, Tanya, about communication. And I want to add to that in the Southeast, and especially in Georgia, we're so darn nice that we hate to say no. So if you come here with an idea, we say, oh, this is great, we love it. But 6 months later, we may say, well, it was not such a good idea. So we're not as blunt as maybe Belgians or Germans, where they say nine or no, it's not going to work. Don't waste your time. Here in the South, it's kind of like, y'all come, it's great place to be. So it's a little different attitude, especially in the Southeast. Frank, let's talk about fun stuff. We talked about business. How about socially? How do you adjust? How did you adjust to Georgia? What networks are there that you can rely on here in the Atlanta area?
Well, there's all kinds of networks, right? There's business networks, as you know, the Belgian-U.S. Chamber of the South is here from a business point of view. Things like what we do today bring us together. But then there's also Belgia Events, which is a social club for Belgians. They meet, for instance, every single month on Thursday. There's what they call the Belgian Thirst Days. So I'm looking forward to going to that on Thursday evening at Fado's in Buckhead. But more or less, what it comes down to is if you go from Belgium and you move to a different country, especially when it's that far, it's really nice to go to a place where you're going to have people from your own country, preferably people your own age, preferably people that go through a little bit the same thing as you do. So because of the Belgian community being so big here, for instance, since 2014, we've actually built many very, very strong friendships with other Belgians that are probably going to last forever. And it was so easy because we all go through the same thing. So you get together as Belgians, and basically what you do is you talk about Americans. And I'm sure if Americans would do the same thing, they would go to Europe, they would talk about Europeans. It's just a natural thing to do. So the fact that the Belgian community is so big here, my friends, my kids all of a sudden come home and they say, hey, we've heard that there's other Belgian kids in our school. We didn't know that there were Belgians in our neighborhood or new Belgians in our neighborhood, but we reached out to the kids' parents and we got together, and it's so easy to create friendships. So that's a very nice thing to have here. And it's much bigger in Atlanta than anywhere before. I mean, I was in Los Angeles as well for a couple of years. There was quite a good Belgian community over there too, but it wasn't even It wasn't even close what you have in Atlanta.
And Tanya, you've been here quite a while as well. I know we have tons of Belgian beers you can buy in Georgia. What other aspects of the Belgian culture have you enjoyed locally?
Well, talking about Belgian beers, actually, my husband started his own like brewery in our basement just to make sure that we keep that tradition going, right? There are some things that you can find and some things you cannot find. So at the beginning, when you're here, you like trying to, well, at least that's what I did, trying to copy your life that you had in Belgium, right? And then it turns out it's not that obvious. You don't have this, like simple things. You don't have the same bread, right? You cannot buy garnalen, like these shrimp things that we have. So there are no boterkoeken and all these things. So you have to like, slowly you're saying, well, it's not here, let's find something else, right? So there's definitely that process that you go through. But okay, that is just minor in the end, right? We all go back once in a while and then we enjoy these things even more, right? Other than that, I think the importance, or even more important, like anytime you move, you have to try and find new people, right? So you either join some sort of club or you get involved in some sort of other form of community service. And that's, of course, something that is huge here in US and also in Georgia. So for me, I try to like, I had my Belgian life. I tried to do what is my American life, right? And that turned out to be like getting engaged with school, because at that point when I moved here, we got in contact with other parents. It was Boy Scouts. So that's like a common thing you have. And those people are still friends of ours. So you just get to know the people by stepping out and engaging in something. And that's not always easy. It's never easy, even if you move from Brussels to Ghent or to Antwerp, right? So you just have to try to build that social life. But there's a lot of charity and good stuff that you can do here as well. So that's definitely one point to consider. Yeah.
And I'm so glad we have Duvel here, my favorite beer. But then when I go to Belgium, I pack my bags with peperkoek, with pain d'épices, which you don't find readily here. But that's okay. You know, there's great things in Georgia, and the Georgia brewers, the whole brewing scene in and around Atlanta is fantastic. The microbrewers have taken off, and it's
add one more thing. Belgian waffles, they are not really Belgian waffles, right? we live with them, right? So it's okay.
That's right. And French fries are not really French fries; they're Belgian fries. So, Frank, one last question: what's the number one piece of advice that you would give a Belgian company looking to expand into the US?
Other than starting with a Belgian, to be honest with you, that's my one piece of advice. But and what we said before, what Tanya said before, to not have too many Belgians here. You don't need many Belgians because Belgium can't sell here. Americans want to buy from Americans. So ultimately, you need to create a US company, not a Belgian company. But my one piece of advice would be set your expectations right, manage expectations. What that means is that the US is the biggest, nicest market to do business with in the world because of its potential and its ease of access. Whether you sell in Georgia or California or any of the states in between, you know, you talk to the same people, you talk the same language, you deal with mostly with the same laws, the same dollar, you know, so you can scale here much more than any other market in the world. So in other words, the potential is tremendous. But manage your expectations that the US typically is not just waiting for you to come here and buy your things. It's going to take longer than you thought in the beginning. And it's, at least it was our personal experience. We thought we were going to just, you know, or at least I did. Our CEO was much more realistic about the expectations, but I thought I would crush it within the first year, within the first 2 years, and then realized that it was much harder than I thought it would. It would go much slower than I thought it would. So it took much longer to be at a certain level. don't expect to be cash flow positive or profitable within the first year or the first 2 years. It's just typically it's not realistic. But once you then hit that critical point where everything starts to just flow together and happen for you, then you grow at rates that are just unimaginable anywhere else in the world, and the potential is then huge. So I guess my main piece of advice would be manage expectations from the get-go. Know it's going to take probably a little bit longer than you thought, but if you hold on to it, then all of a sudden you'll be rewarded with tremendous potential.
Thank you, Frank. Tanya, do you have any advice, you or Barco?
I would like to add to that. I totally agree. And I know, Frank, you said that from a point of view as a starting company, but even like Barco being an established company, if we bring a new product to the market, you have to go through that same cycle again. So it's not a given that once you have a certain path, that the next product they will say, oh yeah, sure, we'll buy that too. So you have to, in each market that you address, in if each product that you bring to the market, you have to go through that cycle again and be very conscious about that. I think for Barco being a name in Belgium and a name in Europe, if I may say that name, it is not there in the United States. So all the expectations that you have, be very careful, as you said, Frank, be very, considerate and think it through, because it's not like, oh, Barco, sure, we know you. No, it is not the case. Yeah. And they may like you for one product. It does not necessarily mean that they like you for another product. So setting expectations is important. I would like to add one more thing. If there is a place to start a business, it is the United States, right? Whether it's Georgia or somewhere else, because the entrepreneurship and the way it is stimulated to start a business, it's so much easier here, right? It's almost like, why don't I have my own company, right? It's like so easy to start anything by yourself. So they set up a lot of the process administratively is just easier, and you have a strong, especially here in Georgia with the universities, the Georgia Tech in Atlanta is stimulating entrepreneurship tremendously amongst their students. So you have that spirit here. I would just say, just do it and use that spirit that exists here to your advantage, whether it's in engineering or anything else. Yeah.
Thank you, Tanya. I do want to address one question we got from the audience about the flight. We heard previously about the direct flight between Atlanta and Brussels that Delta have. That was started by Sabina a long time ago. At this point, there's no direct flight between Atlanta and Brussels. I hope that will come back. I don't know, Consul General Grepsov, do you have any insight on that? As you deal sometimes with the Delta folks, whether they may come back?
I have a meeting with Delta at the end of this week, so you have to charm him back with me on that one.
Yeah, tell them we need a flight.
Yeah,
it is a big issue for Belgians. It really is. I mean, life was so much better when there was direct flights.
Yeah, we're aware of that.
Yeah. And with that, I want to wrap up. I want to thank the Consulate General of Belgium, which is a great supporter of Belgian business in Georgia and in the Southeast in general, with their team. Also, the trade representatives for Flanders and Wallonia and Brussels. I want to thank the state of Georgia. I want to thank Tanya and Barco and Frank and Boplan for answering great questions, great insight into doing business in Georgia and why it's the #1 place to do business when you come to the U.S. Sergio, turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anton, for a very interesting and very insightful conversation. With that, I'd like to close the event and thank everybody for joining us today. To the next one, we hope to see you on the next installment of the Georgia Locations webinar series, and we'll keep you informed on which country is next here in Europe. Be well, stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks, everybody.